Hello everybody! In this video, we're going to look at errors, and in particular, runtime errors. Alright, let's get going. So as a review, an error is when something goes wrong and your code is not going to work as you think it's going to work. More review, a syntax error is when your code doesn't follow the rules of the language. So your code's not going to understand what you're telling it. Because of that, it's going to crash right away. You did a lab with this already. A runtime error is when your code follows the rules of the language, so your coding language, or Python, understands what you're trying to do, but when it actually tries to do what you tell it to do, it crashes. So runtime error starts, but then crashes. Runtime errors come in many different varieties, so remember that as we do these next exercises. Now let's get into runtime errors. Here I have a code that works with just one line. I'm going to run it just to show that it works. And there it goes, it works. Now I'm going to show you some runtime errors. So here I have two runtime errors. The first thing you should look for is red highlights in the code. Unlike with syntax errors, you're not always going to get a red highlight, but you should look for one anyway. When I run this code, you'll see my welcome to Python shows up. So this shows the difference between runtime errors and syntax errors. Syntax errors will crash right away. Runtime errors will run until it finds a line it doesn't like, and then it will crash. In the console, it says name error. This is the variety of runtime error I have. Again, runtime errors come in many different varieties. And a name error just means that Python can't recognize the name of a command or a name of a variable. So just like with syntax errors, Python will tell you the line of the error. But unlike with syntax errors, it does not have a caret to tell you exactly where it is. So here, when you get a runtime error, you'll need to really read the error and figure out what's going on. So in this case, it says name print is not defined. So then I use my brain and go, oh, that should be print. So I'll change that. You'll see my red line go away. I'll click run one more time. And again, what does it do? It is a runtime error. So the lines that work, 1 and 3, get printed out, but then it crashes again on line 5. So I'll check to see if there's a red highlight. There is, so this gives me a hint as to where the error is. Again, my run shows lines 1 and 3 working, but crashes before it gets to line 5. The console says name error once more. Again, a name error is when Python doesn't know the name of what you're doing. Usually it's because of a typo, or else just completely typing the variable name wrong. It can also be if you haven't set the value for your variable, which is the problem here. So you see it's in line 5 in the console. Because it's a runtime error, you'll need to read that error message closely. Name ABC is not defined. So in this case, it's a variable that's not defined. I can define it if I want. Now you'll see the red squigglies go away. I'll run it, and it runs. So now I've copied in 2 more runtime errors. In these examples, it does not show a red highlight in the code. So syntax errors will always show that red highlight, but runtime errors sometimes will and sometimes will not. These are 2 really common runtime errors that people do when they're starting out in Python. When I click run, the first line, which works, runs, and it crashes when it gets to line 4. So the console points out that it's a type error, which is a type of runtime error. The type error is when you have a type, a string, an integer, a float, and it's doing something that it's not allowed to do. The type error says it's on line 4. And what is it doing? Well, here again, you have to read the error message. It can only concatenate string, not int, to string. So we're looking for the words here, concatenate. And when I see the concatenate, I think the plus. You can only concatenate a string to a string. So that makes us look closely at this. This first part is a string, but the second part is an int. And that's what the error is telling us. So to fix this, I would need to cast the number into a string. So let's run again. So once again, it crashes. Once again, there are no red highlights in the code. The runtime errors, again, sometimes will give you a red highlight and sometimes will not. When I run it, the lines that work run, but when it gets to line 7 seems like it follows the rules, but when Python tries to run it, it fails. The console says it's a type error, which is a variety of runtime error. Again, a type error is when you're telling an integer, a float, a string, a list to do something that it's not allowed to do. Python tells you the line number, which is line 7, and now you have to read the error closely. It can only concatenate string, not list, to string. So if I look at this more closely, can only concatenate, that means plus, string, this first part is a string, to a string, not a list. So the second part right here, this numbers, is a list. And it does not let me concatenate a string plus a list. And that's what the error is telling me. So to fix this, I'm going to cast that list to a string. And when I run it now, the code works. These two errors here are the most common errors you will see for people just starting out in Python when we're looking at runtime errors, type errors. Here's another runtime error that's a type error, just to show you another variety. So I'll run this. Once again, it crashes. There's no red highlights in the code to help me, but I can see that it prints the first line. The first line of code works, but it crashes at line 6. So line 6 seems like it follows the rules of Python, but when Python tries to run line 6, the code crashes. So in the console, I'm going to see type error, which is a type of runtime error. The console says the error is on line 6, and now I have to read the error. Unsupported operand type for division, int and string. So it's looking at the division, and it says int and string. And when I look at my code more closely, I see number as an int, and letter is a string. And the error is telling me that that's not allowed. All right, here's another really common mistake that people make when they're beginning Python. I clicked run, and the first line works. So that tells me I have a runtime error, not a syntax error. A syntax error would crash right away. This is another case where there are no red highlights in my code to help me out. The console says it's an index error. An index error is a variety of runtime error, and it has to do with lists and indexes. So that's the number that you put inside of a list, inside of those brackets. You have an error with something that you've done there. Python tells me it's on line 4, and because it's a runtime error, I really need to read the error message. List index out of range. What does that mean? Well, the index is the number inside the list. So in this case, 9999. And it says it's out of range. So here I need to look at my list. My list has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items. 999. The list is not that big. It's because I'm trying to print a number that's outside of the list, it crashes. I'm going to show one last runtime error here. Once again, there are no red highlights in the code to help me out. I'll click run. And the first line runs. But when it gets to line 5, Python doesn't know what to do with what it has. It seems like it follows the rules, but when it tries to run, it crashes. Console says 0 division error. That is another variety of runtime error. The console tells me what line it is, line 5. And now because it's a runtime error, I have to read the error message. So division by 0. So when I look at my code, I see there is a division by 0 going on. Letter is 0. And when I divide by 0, it will crash. So I could change this to 1. And I run it. And now it runs. All right, so here are the solutions to the lab. You should try these out first, but if for some reason you don't get it, here are the solutions. So in this lab, I'm giving you 5 runtime errors to fix. So with errors, the first thing you're going to look for is red lines. There are no red lines in this environment. If you're programming in something like Replit or Visual Studio Code or PyCharm, you will see red lines, but there are no red lines here. I will click run. Because this is a runtime error, it will work up until the point of the error. So the hello world, this is line 1, that works, but then it crashes after that. So I'll look for the line number. It says it's on line 3, and then I need to read the error. So this is going to be harder than a syntax error because there's no caret there to tell me where the error is. I need to read the error and really try to figure out what's going on. So this is a type error, can only concatenate strings, not int to strings. So when you think concatenate, you think pluses, and you know the concatenation only works when I have string plus a string. Here it's telling me I have a string plus an int somehow, so I look at that line and I see that this is a string right here, but this is an int right here. So I know that I need to cast this, and I will. And now let's give it a try. All right, so it crashes again. Again, there are no red lines in this environment, but in many environments there will be. The console now prints out the lines that work, so that's hello world, and my favorite number is 5. But it crashes. Where? It crashes at line 4. So now I need to look at the error and see what it tells me. The error is a name error. Name number 2 is not defined. So again, line 4, number 2 is not defined. And when you see not defined, that means it doesn't exist. So I should make it exist. I will make it exist. Number 2 is equal to 999. And now let's try again. So once again, it crashes. In this environment, there are no red lines. The part of the code that works, and it crashes at line 7. So then I know it's a runtime error and I need to read the error message. Name error, name prin is not defined. So it says prin is not defined in line 7. That's here. And when I look at it, I realize there's no such thing as prin. It should be a print, and the colors kind of tell me that at the same time. I'll make my change and I'll try it again. Crashes again. There are no red lines to help me out. The part of the code that's working works, but then it crashes at line 12. So I know this is a runtime error, and so now I need to read the error message. And the error message is index error, list index out of range. So again, line 12, index out of range. So the index is the number that's inside the brackets, inside the square brackets of the list. My index is 4. It's telling me that is out of range. And when I look closely at it, 0, 1, 2, 3. If I want to print out the last name in the list, that should be 3, not 4. Remember, lists in Python start with 0. So I'll make that correction, run it one more time. It crashes again. There are no red lines to help me out in this environment, but there might be in a different one. The part of the code that works. And you'll notice here the last name of the list is Cassidy is the line that works. That was not there before. I look and it tells me it's line 14. Line 14 is where my error is. And now because it's a runtime error, I'm going to have to read the error message. Name error. Name, last name is not defined. So in line 14, I have president equals first name plus a space plus last name. And it tells me last name is not defined. I can define it. And let's try it again. And when I do that, it works. Alright, so that's pretty much it. Hope that was useful to you. And if it was, please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you next time.